Welcome to the GC Bizcast, a collaboration of J. Whitney Bunting College of Business and Technology and the Department of Communication at Georgia College and State University. Here we discuss important topics with today's business leaders and educators. We produce weekly podcasts from our beautiful campus in Milledgeville, Georgia. We're excited that you've joined us. Our conversations should inform you and entertain you. The views expressed are the views of the individuals on the program and do not represent the views of Georgia College and State University. So, let's get started.
Welcome back to the Business Podcast. I'm Sruti. I'm a senior marketing major.
My name is Aaliyah Turman, and I'm a junior management and information systems major.
Hey, my name is Hendrix. I'm a sophomore marketing major.
And today we have a very special guest. Dennis, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Denis Mandich. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Qrypt. We're a quantum secure encryption systems company, and we're happy to be here.
Awesome. Could you maybe go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you do for our listeners that don't know you and aren't familiar with quantum technologies?
Sure. So two of the biggest technologies for certainly your generation that are up and coming today, of course, AI and quantum. A lot of people know what AI is. Quantum's a little bit more esoteric, but it really comprises several different fields. Quantum computing, which is these huge computers that are way more powerful than anything that could ever be built with classical computers that are made with regular microchips. And there's quantum communications, which is what Qrypt does. We secure communications channels against quantum computers, which could theoretically break almost all the communications that we use today. And then there's something we don't spend a lot of time talking about, which is quantum sensing. That's really what the quantum industry is and where this is all going for, the next 50 years probably.
Can you tell us a little bit about why it's important to be having secure communication?
Sure. So the entire digital economy, the global internet, every HTTPS session, just like this Zoom call, every app that you use from iMessage to WhatsApp and so on, uses a piece of technology or math called encryption. And that encryption is based on a simple problem, is when you multiply two prime numbers together, that's a very easy calculation to make. When you try to get those primes back from that multiplication product, that's very hard. So all of our security on the internet is based on that very simple sounding problem. That turns out to be extremely hard for classical computers to break, meaning get our private key and be able to read all of our traffic, email, text messages, everything else. Well, turns out that's a super easy problem for larger quantum computers. We call them cryptographically relevant quantum computers. And so that's what Qrypt solves for. We build these new systems, software, algorithms, and hardware that secure all of our infrastructure for the long term. We hear a lot about how China and other countries are hacking and collecting our information. We just saw a big announcement from CISA today. Those are really critical to our future and securing our lives and our privacy and restoring trust in the internet itself. That's what Qrypt does in a nutshell. And we call that harvest now and decrypt later, where a lot of these big hacker groups and nation states are collecting information that's encrypted with this older technology, hoping that they'll have access to a quantum computer in the future when they can decrypt that data and then operationalize it and ultimately monetize it and put U.S. companies out of business. So it's not just a national security issue, it's a national economic security issue because they've taken so much of our IP and put many U.S. companies out of business that they might not need to steal anymore. They'll just take over our economy over the long term, and then most of us will be unemployed or working for Huawei one day instead of Apple.
Okay, I know you talked a little bit about harvest now, decrypt later. So what specific vulnerabilities do quantum computing advances pose in terms of the harvest now, decrypt later type attacks?
Yeah, so most of the belief of people on the internet is that because I transmitted a secure message, like iMessage, for example, is that if it wasn't captured immediately and read by the adversary, that we're safe. But what we know from decades, going back more than 50 years, is that big intelligence agencies have been able to collect that data at great expense by doing, a wiretap on a piece of copper cable in the Soviet Union, let's say. collecting that information and then hoping to decrypt it later when it was still valuable. Well, today those boundaries don't exist anymore because most of our networks and our digital economy is built on virtual networks and cloud environments. It can be collected from anywhere in the world from a laptop. So I can harvest data from an ISP, an internet service provider in Europe, without ever leaving my bedroom. And then I'll just sit on that data for as long as it takes until these quantum computers come online. And there'll be a cloud service, just like data storage or anything else. I won't need to own a quantum computer. I'll just use that quantum computer in the cloud, rent an hour or so on it, decrypt the data that I'm already sitting on today. That might be 2, 3, 5 years in the future. It might be 10 years. It may even be never. We just don't know. But it's really an existential threat to our economy, which is why it's such a critical issue and why you read so much about it with Harvest Now and Decrypt Later. But the short answer is that it's a very old, very successful technique that many intelligence services have been using for decades, more than 50 years.
So do you see like, for example, if there was some type of hack, maybe a decade ago, would you start to see that data pop up just now? Would that kind of be an example of that?
It would be. So if that data was encrypted and
Uh-huh.
someone harvested it 10 years ago
Mhm.
and they had a quantum computer today, they could decrypt it. And then you'd start seeing some of the fallout from that very quickly, whether it's stealing money from banks and so on. But the real secret is that people don't understand here is that you don't need a quantum computer. Many times, the software libraries that were used, the implementation of the hardware, and other flaws in those systems are found and then exploited, even without quantum computers. So Harvest Now, Decrypt Later, like I said, has been going on long before quantum computers. It will be going on long after quantum computers. And the big difference today that didn't exist 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when this techniques first started really getting prominent, is that cybersecurity researchers are out there finding these flaws in these systems and then publishing them so everyone knows what it is. So if you're sitting on data, it costs nothing to store data anymore. Tens of dollars to store terabytes of data. You can do that indefinitely for petabytes of data. When that data will still be valuable, and you don't have to do the research on how to break it. Somebody will find the flaw, and then you can exploit it in the future without doing any work other than storing it.
What would you say surprises you most about quantum computers and the progress that we've made in the past 5 or 10 years?
The pace at which it's accelerating is really surprising because there were a lot of very difficult engineering and software challenges that had to be overcome. New algorithms had to be developed for controlling these systems, and the physics of the technologies had to be explored, and that just takes a lot of time. But what we've seen just in the last 6, 7 weeks, maybe even 2 months, is just another big jump in these systems. When we try to rate classical computers, we usually quote a number. What's the density of transistors in a microchip? That's how powerful we can pack into a small space, the computing power that we need to do anything. Well, in quantum computers, the equivalent of a transistor is called a qubit, and it's based on two types of qubits. One is physical qubits. They're the ones that control the logical qubits. And the more logical qubits you get, the more operations you can perform that are relevant to breaking cryptography, for example. So the numbers are staggering. If you think about it in terms of the number of particles in the entire universe, a quantum computer with just about 300 logical qubits, that might be a lot more physical qubits, but 300 logical qubits is more computing power than if you converted every atom in the entire universe into a supercomputer. That's stunning. That's the exponential growth of adding a single qubit to a computer doubles its power. You just keep doubling and doubling very quickly. So it might not sound like a lot when these companies announce 50 or so logical qubits like they did a few weeks ago. But remember, 51 qubits doubles the power. On a regular transistor based computer, you need double the amount of transistors. So if I had a billion transistors in my laptop, I would need 2 billion to double the power. With quantum computers, I just need one more qubit. That's how fast exponentially these things can grow with just a little bit more research. So we're very close to that transition when the quantum computers that they're building today will be more powerful than all the computers that have ever been built in history or that could even ever be built. So those numbers are hard to get your mind around. They're almost in astrophysical terms.
This is probably something I should have brought up at the beginning, but the more that I'm listening to you talk, the more I'm curious. Was this something that you were passionate about, like in college, or something that like you just like it sort of was fostered?
Well, for me, I'm a physicist by background. So my background was in string theory and quantum physics and particle physics. So yeah, that was what my curiosity started from a young age in math and physics. But I spent 20 years in the intelligence community where I saw the scale of the theft, particularly by China, of IP. And I'll caution people not to single China out because a lot of countries do it, but they do it on a scale that's unimaginable. And the theft of IP and trade secrets and everything else exists between Chinese companies inside of China. So it's nothing unique to stealing it from us or anybody else in the world. It's just their normal business operations there. And so when I saw this happening in the intelligence community, and I have three kids, I want them to have jobs in the US one day. I think this is the best country in the world for all of us to succeed. Any one of us could go start a company and become the next Google or whatever. You can't do that in China, and that's not going to happen in a communist society or working for Ant or somebody like that. We really need to keep those jobs here, and our population's exploding. We have more high tech being applied to fewer spaces that we need people to engage in. And if we let more IP disappear out of this country, we're going to have fewer and fewer high tech jobs, the high value jobs that every college graduate wants to get into.
As I guess someone who's been like spearheading a quantum technologies, I don't even know what the word is, but just someone who's been kind of like on the forefront of that, what do you think are some personal insights that you've kind of gained over the past 10-ish years?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I see is the lack of talent in the U.S. People want to be TikTok influencers, and they see an easy path to monetizing all kinds of nonsense or opening a restaurant. Those are all great, and there's never going to be a shortage of that. But we really need people to do the hard things in this country. Go and do the hard majors. And if you can't do that, if you're in something else, you should still be thinking about quantum. We need marketing people. We need communications majors. We need regular engineers, product design people, all the things that you need to build a big business out of these technologies. That's all essential. And it's just a matter of getting over the fear of like, I'll never understand physics or quantum. You don't have to. You only have to understand what the impact is to the US and why it's so important. In China, it's one of the three pillars of their economy for the next 50 years. And they have a national program to identify at a very early age people who are good at physics and math and have a career path laid out for them all the way until they get their PhD and get a job one day. We just don't have that in the US. That's why more people at the grassroots level in college really need to start looking at that. And there are several National Science Foundation programs to get that interest in kids in high school. The fear is for most kids is that by the time you get to college, if you don't have some physics in your background and you try to start that your freshman year, you're probably not going to make it, and you're certainly not going to graduate in 4 years. It's going to take you at least 5 years. So it's a barrier that we have to overcome at a much earlier age because there are plenty of jobs open. You will have a job if you major in quantum physics or major in communicating to the quantum industry, whatever it might be. Those jobs are open, and we can't fill them.
That's really good advice. Oh no, you go ahead.
Do you see kind of like, I know you talked about how there's a barrier. Do you see that barrier being broken within the next few years between trying to connect these students with the quantum fields?
Yeah, there's way more materials available just in YouTube or whatever social media platforms that just didn't exist a few years ago. And with these initiatives that are really pushed by the US government, they recognize that we're behind. We cannot lose this race. AI and quantum, it's a technology that's going to drive future growth in the economy. We can't be second. There's no prize for second place in this. And so I really see what the government's doing and pushing it across the board, getting more people interested and in AI as well, and doing programming and things like that is paying off just in the next few years. Again, if we can just target high school students today that are really interested in this, they might want to major in some peripheral field in college for quantum, then by all means, that will pay off very quickly.
You mentioned AI. Is I guess the growth of AI that has happened within the past year been something that's like drastically affected the industry, quantum industry?
Not really for quantum. There's speculation that quantum computers will be able to promote new technologies that will be applicable for AI, but we don't really know. We know what the math and computer science applications are for breaking cryptography using quantum computers. We don't know what those killer applications are for AI yet. There's some speculation about some of the math that they use in various parts of AI, but no killer application that we know of yet. But that's coming. We're just in the earliest days of all this. AI is in its infancy. I mean, you've all used Chat GPT by now, right?
Oh yeah.
It's not great, right? You get some really silly answers, and they call them hallucinations. We used to call that horrifyingly wrong. I will say that the other problem is that there's I don't know if it's a societal or some other pressure, that there are almost no women in physics in quantum. We look around and if you're a woman in quantum, you're going to be very high on the priority list to hire because there's so few of them, and we need that for the next generation of young girls in grammar school today to get interested in this and say, okay, there's a role model out there that's been very successful doing this, and they're out there. It's just so few, and so again, engaging a much broader audience at a very early age and showing them a path, an interesting path that they can follow for a career. It'll be hard, right? But when you do all those hard things, the challenging things that other people are afraid of doing, you're going to be employable, right? You're going to be in that group of people that everyone covets in their company.
Being a leader at a company that's kind of like in a field in a high level, what leadership principles guide how you build culture and nurture talent?
Yeah, we have such an issue of finding people with the tech background that we need because we're in deep tech, where it's not just computer science and material science, things like that. We do very, very hard mathematics, crypto mathematics, very, very hard physics problems for which we have relationships with the national labs, with Los Alamos and Oak Ridge National Lab. Those things are daunting for anyone, and so it's very hard to find the people that have any experience like that. So everyone that we bring in, we tell them from the beginning, you just have to be smart. You have to have grit. You have to be willing to learn it. And it's going to be a lot of self-learning. It's going to be a lot of nights and weekends, reading the materials that we provide you from our website that you can find on your own on the internet. But it's a self-driven mission to be successful. Again, because very few people will ever come in with those skills, you have to have your own drive.
I read in a statement of yours that said, I believe privacy is a non-negotiable human right. At what point in your career would you say that it really started to resonate with you about where you started to have really care for other people's privacy and as far as in that community goes?
September 11th. So I was in the intelligence community when that happened. And when the intelligence community needed a lot of data from these big social media behemoths, they didn't want to provide it. And it wasn't because they cared about anyone's privacy, because they gorge on our privacy. That's how they generate ads that are targeted to you. They need that. And the applications that they give us are not free. We've paid for that with our privacy and our data. So they didn't want to share that with the US government for counterterrorism operations right after we were attacked on September 11th, because they didn't want us to know what kind of data that they were collecting on people and what they were doing with it. We would never have tolerated that at any other time in our history in the United States. Imagine that statistically, you, for whatever reason, when you were 16, you did Instagram pictures of yourself drinking beer or doing something absurd that every teenager in the history of mankind has ever done. But now, because you posted that picture, you're categorized as a slightly higher risk for binge drinking in college and not graduating. Well, that data is processed and resold 1 million times to lots of brokers who will use that to assign a score to you that's a risk score. and that's for insurance and everything else. We didn't sign up for that. We signed up for using the internet to communicate and collaborate, not to make the FANG companies richer by exploiting the data that we provide to them. And so my goal at the time was knowing exactly what was done with that data, how they categorize all of us, which we would find extremely offensive, and get back to having communications be private. We used to meet in person, right? We used to have a private communication in our office where nobody was listening. There was no Siri or anything like that. Nobody was data mining that and deciding if we were a good candidate for a job or something like that. But that's what it's used for today. And we really need to get back to that because we don't see each other anymore. COVID revealed that most of the time we're going to be remote workers. We're going to communicate with these tools like, messaging applications and so on. We need those to have guaranteed privacy, that no one in the middle can ever listen in on those conversations or use that data in a way that we find inappropriate and most often offensive. And believe me, a lot of that's statistically valid. You drank beer in that picture, you are less likely to graduate from college for whatever reason. That's what stats say. But you didn't sign up for that when you posted that to your friends, right? You didn't know that that's how it was going to be used, but other people do. And that's an advantage for them going forward. And that should be where we go back to. This, we call it surveillance capitalism, has to go away. Giving away our data to anyone who will buy it. And you see that 23andMe today is probably going to be worth zero. Where do you think all that data is going to get sold to when the fire sale happens to pay off the debtors and so on? Do you want your DNA being sold to the highest bidder or anybody who will pay for it in China or Russia or wherever? No, you didn't sign up for that when you did that test.
I have a quick question about that. Before the advancement of the internet and of technology and social media, was the focus of quantum computing something else, or was it not a thing, or?
Well, the technologies needed to scale quantum computers bigger just didn't exist. So it was years and years, probably decades of research that led to the technologies that we're using today that we know that can scale to the point where we have millions of qubits, not just the 2 or 3 that work great in a lab, but we can't actually do anything useful or marketable with them. Today, we're over that hump. We're now at the threshold of where at any point in time, one discovery, one change to the system, one engineering innovation could take us from where we are today, which is experimental level technologies, to something that breaks the entire internet. Remember that a quantum computer with just about 4,000 logical qubits can break all of the encryption that we use for every communication channel that you've ever used in a browser. And any of that data that was stored from 20 years ago can immediately be decrypted and read in the clear. And I'm sure that none of you on this call knew that when you sent all those text messages to your friends that are sitting on a server someplace. There's something horrible and inappropriate in there that you said when you were mad or that you'll be embarrassed about. And imagine all that getting exposed to someone in the future. And again, that there's going to be machines that are going to read that data, they're going to digest it with AI, and they'll assign all kinds of traits and characteristics to you as a risk factor, as somebody to target for ads, what have you. But you didn't know that when you sent those messages, right?
I think it's really awesome that you're getting to be on this podcast and talk to us about this, because I really, honestly, like, I don't really think much about my privacy online. Like, and I'm sure like so many of our listeners probably don't either. And I think it's really awesome and inspiring that you feel so, I guess, strongly about protecting our country and our information. I also think that, I mean, like, going into like what you were saying, like, it could probably be a really like negative industry sometimes when you're just like hearing about all of the things that are going on. What makes you, I guess, optimistic about how quantum technologies can help, I guess, just like the problems that we're having in our society right now?
Yeah, with what my company does, Qrypt does, we provide a very high level of security. It's called quantum secure end-to-end encryption. meaning that you and everyone on this call and me can have a private channel that no third party can ever listen in on. So we designed and architected in a security model and all the technologies that you need to enable that to make sure that our communication, our chat here on a call, a video, whatever it might be, is absolutely private. We've restored that state of when we were both in a room together and could talk privately without Big Brother or the FANG companies listening to us. So that is a state that we need to go back to on the communication side. On the computing side, remember the numbers that I gave you, how they scale exponentially? They can solve problems. This is a critical point, that are impossible for regular computers of any size. It doesn't matter if they were the size of the universe. That's how fast and quickly they scale. They will solve problems for pharmaceuticals and vaccines, for energy and battery systems, and many things that are going to benefit society immensely. But with any technology like this, it can be used for bad and it can be used for good. We didn't use nuclear technologies first to cure cancer. We used them to blow up cities in Japan in World War II, right? And that's what you can expect from quantum computers too. They will be used for bad things first. But that's where the money is, just like Dillinger said years ago. That's why he robbed banks. And that's why these things will be exploited for both sides. We just have to be really careful with regulation and not hand it over all of our trust to a bunch of companies whose interest is in making the most amount of money, because our interests are opposed to what they're doing. Our interests are to restore privacy and to enjoy those communications that we had 50, 30, 40 years ago. So quantum will be used for a lot of good too. So it's not all dark days.
Okay, so I know you kind of talked about how you talked about how it can be used for good and bad. Where do you see it going in the future from maybe 10 to 20 years from today as we get more AI and the internet expands and we get more technological advancements?
Yeah, quantum computers are really an insurmountable market advantage for anyone who has them. So I see them being applied to almost any industry, because any edge that you get in, name the widget that you're trying to develop, if quantum computers are that difference, that might mean that market is yours and all the other companies go out of business. So I see a lot of research coming down in the very near future. Like, what are the things that we haven't thought of? What are the other problems that we can apply them to once they get a little bit bigger, that we can really monetize? And that's really what will drive the business. Once you get money coming into the quantum computer companies, because they're providing a service to large industries, like pharmaceuticals or healthcare and so on, then you'll see it really take off. And at the same time, we need to secure those communications against quantum computers. In fact, that's what should happen first, because if we're not secure against quantum computers, that harvest now and decrypt later threat just persists much longer, when we can't afford to lose that data. The consequences are just too great. And that's down at the individual. It's not just the national economic security. It's down to the person. What if your data set is part of a big hacker group that suddenly reveals all of your emails since the time you were 5 or whatever it might be? Who knows what kind of nonsense is in there that was funny at the time that might not be so funny 10 years from now.
I think those are all of our questions that we have for you today.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being on this call. Honestly, we're so grateful, and I feel like I just learned so much.
Yeah, I understand it way more now.
I know, me too.
Yeah, kind of like they were saying right before I came into this, I was pretty unfamiliar with it, but now I have a lot broader understanding, I feel like.
Well, you have to evangelize to all of your classmates. And, if you're ever up in New York, you're always welcome to come up and get a tour of the Freedom Tower. We're on the 83rd floor, so you'll get some really cool selfies, but you're going to have to learn a little bit of physics while you're here.